Hey, I think we have everybody here. Thanks again for being here. My name is Shelley Mann. I'm the VP of Marketing for Zia Consulting, and I'm your host today. In today's webinar, we have experts from Rocket Software as well as Zia Consulting who will be discussing the benefits of archiving data out of the SAP environment to maximize performance and drive additional value and savings. They plan to share Rocket's SAP certified archiving solution using Mobius and provide a preview of how you can leverage the solution quickly to move transactional and content data out of your SAP environment. Before we begin, I would like to remind you, it's an interactive webinar. We encourage you to have questions and submit them to us in the Q&A function. We're going to do our best to address all of those at the end of the session today. With that, let me introduce our speakers. Today, we are joined by Jeremy White, the Director of Managed and Cloud Services at Zia Consulting, as well as Jim McGuire, the Director of Product Management and Content Solutions at Rocket Software. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy.
All right. Thank you, Shelley, and welcome, everyone. Excited to be here today. We see that there's folks joining from a variety of different places. So for the folks who are up early, thank you for joining, and late. And yeah, we're looking forward to the presentation today. So I thought I'd just begin with a couple of minutes. My title's a little bit strange for the SAP webinars. So I thought I'd give a little bit of background on that. So I've actually been working with SAP since the mid-90s. My first job was on an R2 implementation focused on, oddly enough, how do we get content out of SAP to keep the SAP environment performant? So here I am 25, 27 years later, and it's still a problem that we can solve. So excited to talk about that, and excited to be joined by Jim McGuire, who has a long history as well, and he'll introduce himself here in just a little bit. So before we get started, and we're just going to kind of jump right in and start talking about the SAP Rocket solutions, and I'm going to turn that over to Jim. But I thought I'd just hit on the agenda real quickly and talk about how these things are tied together. So we're going to, Jim's going to give you an overview of the Rocket SAP Overview and Archiving solution, and that's the primary focus of today. But he's also going to give you just a brief overview of all of the technologies that Rocket offers, and from an SAP perspective. So we're going to hit on that a couple of minutes as well. And then we're also going to, at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about a couple of future webinars that we have coming up as well. And then we're going to talk about how do we move the content out of SAP and get it into the archiving solution. So that's leveraging the SAP document migration solution. And then we'll also talk about how do we provide the managed services to provide your organization with the agility to focus on the core business and move the application upgrades and patching and all that kind of stuff to an external vendor. So lots of different options in terms of how you approach your implementation. So we'll walk through those today. But just before I turn it over to Jim, I just kind of wanted to talk about why these subjects are important. And what we always hear is that there's a cost associated with it, and that's true. So moving from Suite 7 or ECC 6 to S/4HANA, there's a change in how SAP charges for storage, moving into in-memory. So that's certainly one of the most important things, is how do we get the content out of SAP so that we can lower the cost, essentially, in HANA. But what that also does is it reduces the amount of ingress and egress fees. In other words, moving that content or archiving that content prior to moving to HANA means that we're reducing the amount of ingress fees, and then later down the road, reducing the amount of egress fees to get it back out of SAP so that we can archive it. And we'll also just talk about the fact that this, simplifies the migration process, right? So if we're, moving a 1 terabyte database versus a 3 terabyte database, this significantly reduces the time, the migration costs, and also just, simplifies the process. And, part of the benefit of doing that as well is not necessarily related to cost. It's related to the fact that we can improve the performance of the SAP database by limiting the amount of the data that's in the S/4HANA environment. And what this does is it also reduces the amount of time that's associated with backups and also recoveries. So, and even the ability to copy data back and forth between your disaster recovery sites or your business continuity site. By keeping this data limited and in the S4 environment, this will reduce the times and also just the costs associated with being on the wire with that amount of data. And then we're also going to focus on how do we get the content out? So after Jim wraps up the session on the SAP archive, we'll talk about how do we leverage a tool that we have and a process that we have, a proven process that we have to quantify the data that is in the SAP environment, the ECC or S4 environment, and how do we migrate that content out and still allow users to have access to that. And part of what we'll talk about when we get to that section is that we have a pretty simple, fast, and robust tool, an analysis tool, and we'll talk more about that when we get to that section. But what that tool allows us to do is analyze and quantify that data so that we can provide you with a simple ROI snapshot before we even start talking about whether or not a project makes sense. And that's something that we're willing to do at our cost and non-billable to you. So we'll go into that a bit more as well. And then we'll talk about how we can manage cloud and host this in either your cloud or your on-premise environment or the Zia cloud and manage that environment for you. And what that typically does is reduces the cost by 10 or 20% by leveraging resources that already have the training, the experience, et cetera, to do this, and also leverage our scale of volume. So we have the ability to manage multiple implementations at one time, and we're assuming the costs associated with that. And what our customers really see, the cost savings and that benefit is one component of it, but the real thing that they note is their ability to stay agile and competitive by having the ability to deploy capabilities into their environment 2 to 3 times more quickly and faster than a traditional migration customer or a customer that's managing those types of applications on site. And again, that's just by the fact that we have the teams in place and they're already ready to go, and we're managing the applications so that we can focus on those without kind of getting mixed up into the other business processes. So with that said, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Jim McGuire at Rocket Software, and he's going to walk us through the Rocket Stack and also the SAP solution, SAP Archive solution.
Well, thank you, Jeremy. And thank you again also, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedules to join with us today. For a subject that's near and dear to my heart, I'm Jim McGuire, Product Management Director for Rocket Content Services, and I have a long history working with SAP solutions. I worked for 15 years in chemical manufacturing, first as an R&D chemist, tech service rep, customer service manager, an SD team lead on a 4-year multi-phase SAP implementation, and then finally as a global supply chain director, leveraging SAP as our core ERP solution. That is before I changed the course of my career while searching, very much like Jeremy, for an SAP content archiving solution, because one of the things most folks realize is that within a year or two of implementing SAP, it's something you need to do. So my focus has been on furthering our solutions for SAP, and I'm going to unpack a lot of information over the next 10 minutes, so I encourage you to put any questions in the chat or in the Q&A section, and we'll cover them toward the end. So here we are looking at our popular offerings. So we're going to focus in on Rocket Content Service Solutions and what they deliver for SAP-enabled enterprises. And while you can see there are a good number of areas where our content offerings add significant value, we're primarily going to focus in on Mobius, which is a proven enterprise-scale content repository, and primarily for SAP data archiving and content archiving, though it also handles other use cases reflected here, such as connecting silos of SAP and non-SAP content within or outside of SAP, enhancing end user experiences for federated searching and advanced content governance. Other content solutions reflected here will be the subject of future webinars, including Rocket Cypress for document composition and intelligent distribution and delivery, Rocket Audit and Analytics for data validation and reconciliation, and Rocket Content Automation for extended workflow and RPA capabilities. Next slide, please, Jeremy. So as an organization who's been using SAP for more than a year or two, anyone knows that you need to archive the database data to ensure good system performance and end user experience, as Jeremy mentioned. Ensure that those nightly backups and restores actually happen. Enable faster and easier upgrade experiences. When you have less data and content to migrate, it's certainly easier to upgrade. Ensure that data retention requirements are met and effectively manage the end-of-life scenarios for content. You don't want to keep data and content available past your retention requirements. It just adds to risk. And then last but not least, minimizing storage costs. Any organization that uses SAP and handles a high volume of transactions, whether they be sales orders, productions orders, material movements, and the associated financial and master data transactions, archiving that data is really important and significantly reduces the strain on the system and the storage costs across production, development, testing, QA, and disaster recovery instances by up to 97% in total. That's because when archiving data, there's compression of 3-to-1 or up to 5-to-1, in addition to the standard compression that Mobius provides. Archiving data is a project in and of itself that includes archiving in the right order because of data dependencies. For example, archiving sales order data is highly desirable because I get a compression of 5-to-1. But that's because there are a lot of indices pointing to other related transactions, such as material movements, finance, and controlling. And those must be archived first. You can't just go for the ones where you're going to get the biggest buck, because if you haven't archived the financial transactions or materials movements, you won't be able to archive the sales order transactional data. So it's really important that when you approach an archiving project, you do so with the right insights, the right understanding. It really is a project and it takes a significant amount of effort. And there are certain standard SAP reports that many of you are likely already using, like DB02 and DB15, to determine what are the largest and fastest growing tables in SAP. Mobius has been enabling critical data and content archiving for all SAP related business scenarios with SAP, with our certified integration for over a couple of decades now, including the archiving and lifecycle management of SAP data, print lists, documents, images, audio, video files, using traditional SAP Archive Link, or more currently, less proprietary SAP ILM web methods that allows you to archive data to nearline storage and then still query against it using HANA, leveraging SAP IQ. Mobius customers also leverage our advanced federation capabilities to give their users a single pane of glass when accessing relevant content, as well as advanced content governance capabilities like sensitive data redaction, event-based retention, reason-based content holds, typically for audit or litigation purposes. Migration of content to less costly storage media as it ages is a very common scenario for our customers. Usually, once something is business complete, you want to keep it on fast storage, only for a period of time. As it ages, you want to move it to less costly storage media, which maybe doesn't have as good a response time, but chances are it's for an inquiry or something that it's not as critical to get that in a split-second regard. And we've also helped many of our customers in decommissioning legacy systems and not losing visibility to that information. Next slide, please. And as our customers are moving their current ECC 6.0 data and related content to HANA, whether it's on-prem or on cloud or in hybrid scenarios, which is very common for our customers, they're evaluating the impact of the move, and they're looking to avoid stressing the system and increasing costs. By bringing, you don't want to bring everything over, right? You only want to bring those open items, those open transactions, the relevant master data. And they're right now, many of our customers are reevaluating what is their current content and archiving strategy. Many of them have been archiving data and documents, images, and other content for years. And they want to reassess what they're doing and make sure that they're providing secure access directly in SAP, leveraging things like SAP generic services for object, and linking relevant content to the appropriate transactions or master data records, such as finance and controlling, or in accounts payable, receivables, materials management, sales and distribution, plant maintenance, and that includes business intelligence, or what used to be called business objects. And our customers have likewise enjoyed the ability to have secure access to all the relevant content directly using our HTML5 viewing client, REST API services, or by sharing SAP content via SharePoint using our certified SharePoint interface. The bottom line is that for over 2 decades, our content service solutions have been delivering significant value to SAP enterprise enabled enterprises worldwide. In addition to SAP data, Rocket enables invoice automation in accounts payable for the majority of our SAP customers, including some of the world's largest enterprises in manufacturing, such as high-tech, automotive, consumer goods, banking, financial services, and logistics. One of the world's largest silicon chip manufacturers, Mobius governs SAP inbound and outbound content and data, plus non-SAP content and data from many B2B systems. And in their case, they have over 120 terabytes of content under Mobius management and enabling secure self-service via their web portal for thousands of users worldwide. Rocket also can enable the ability to securely share SAP-related content via SharePoint, as I just mentioned. For instance, we have a customer that's an Italian credit cooperative, and they use our solution to seamlessly and securely share SAP content with over 400 banks at the end of market close daily, and then synchronizing that content with data and content updates to improve operational processes and end user experiences. We've also helped a number of our customers migrate away from less robust SAP archiving solutions, such as OpenText, Documentum, FileNet, and even integrated with ancient SAP archive solutions that some of you may be aware of, like Sionic. We typically take a hybrid approach to migration of competitive archives to minimize any impact on end users. We've also helped, as I mentioned before, with the decommissioning of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of legacy applications for many organizations, so that customers and admins have no loss of data visibility. Next slide, please, Jeremy. So SAP's archiving solution enables our customers to archive and manage SAP data more efficiently, improving system performance by significantly reducing the amount of data stored in the database, improving both transactional processing times and response times, cost savings by reducing storage, as well as reducing backup and restore times, complying with regulatory and governance requirements, and empowering organizations to respond to audit and legal requirements and requests. Leverage information lifecycle management for data and content from creation to deletion, ensuring that the appropriate disposition is done in secure and auditable environment to provide business continuity in the most efficient way. And regardless of where you are in the journey to HANA, I believe strongly that Rocket and our partners at Zia can add significant value to your upgrade experience and ongoing SAP operations. And with that said, I'm going to hand it back over to my highly esteemed colleague and partner, Jeremy White, who's going to provide an overview of our SAP migration solutions offer. Jeremy, back to you.
Thank you very much, Jim. So Jim's just kind of laid out what the SAP Archive solution is from Rocket. And just a couple of things before we move on. I have a tendency to call the solution the Mobius SAP Archive. So that is synonymous with Rocket SAP Archiving. I just happen to be around long enough and old enough to know the legacy name. But the Mobius, for some of you folks out there, you'll know and be familiar with Mobius SAP Archive. That's the same thing as the Rocket SAP Archive. So apologies in advance if you hear me kind of referring to it in both ways, but same thing there. So Jim's just covered that. And now, the next couple of slides, what we're going to do is focus on how do we move document content. And the reason that we're focusing specifically on this one is document content is something that we can quantify very easily and very quickly using the analysis report and the tool that we have. So the tool that we have is called SAP Doc Migrate, focuses specifically on document content. And this is something that we can do with almost no planning. And so what I mean by that is we can identify document content, we can move it, migrate it over to the Rocket SAP Archive, but still leave in place the exact same attachment list that the users are already used to. So what that means is no user change management at all. So if there's a document that's named purchase order for Target, then once we migrate that content, the attachment list in SAP is still going to say purchase order for Target. So no change at all. It's just what we're doing is changing where that document is stored. So what is it? So SAP Doc Migrate, it is a software and a service. It's something that we use during our projects. It's leveraging the SAP resources. So it means that it's an ABAP program that we're deploying it straight into Basis, and we're following the standard SAP transports. The registration report. So within that bundle, there's a few different things. There's the report that allows us to quantify data, the series of migration tools that allows us to move the data. And then there's also the delete mechanisms. And as Jim mentioned earlier, the main thing that we're trying to do here is improve performance, reduce backups, ensure that we're being as streamlined as possible from a cost perspective when we're talking about the money that we're going to spend in S/4HANA. And the number that I'm talking about here between 10 and 30%, this is different than the number that Jim's talking about. This is really just kind of right off the bat. This is very low hanging fruit that we can, again, focusing just on that document content, typically migrate it out. Most of these projects are less than 90 days. So really, really straightforward in terms of when we're just focusing on the doc content, get it out, automatically save money and automatically start improving the performance of the SAP environment, and also reducing, the costs associated and the time associated with migrations and backups and recoveries and so on. So as I mentioned earlier, it's one basis tool, but really there's three things that are happening inside of it. The analysis tool, this is the piece that I was talking about in the opening that we're happy to work with you on, and we're happy to do this as a non-billable exercise with you. And the reason that we want to do this is in many instances, we can prove an ROI without even focusing on the full governance associated with achieving full or developing and deploying a full archive strategy. As Jim mentioned earlier, it's a full project in itself. It takes time to think through how you're going to move this content. It's sequential in the way that we need to do it. And all of that is definitely important. It needs to be done. And it's part of what I would call kind of the phase two, meaning first, let's get the document content out and immediately start recognizing the benefits associated with that. And in tandem, we would start working with you on what is the archive strategy that makes the most sense for you, and analyzing that data to understand what are the volumes that we can archive out from a transactional and report list and so on perspective. So first piece, analysis tool, like I said, that's an SAP transport. So we're happy to work with you, deploy that and quantify the data, and then work with you based on your cost basis from SAP to determine how quickly can we achieve an ROI. Most of the time it would be in the first year, meaning the services as well as the software. In most instances, we would be able to achieve a ROI just by simply moving documents, and then we can get on to the second part or the part that we would be doing in tandem. And then the migration tool itself, this is the thing that, registers what is the content. That way we can analyze it and decide how we're going to move it. So we don't take a big bang approach where we say, okay, there's, 10 million objects, bang, let's move them over. Instead, we would look at, where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. The other thing is this is a basis tool, so we don't want to clobber the SAP performance. So what we would do is break it up into chunks, typically run it based on an analysis of when is the least likely time to impact performance, et cetera. And then the third piece of that is once we've confirmed and audited that the content has been moved to migrated to the SAP Mobius environment, then we would leverage the cleanup tool to go delete that original link. And the beauty of this is, as I said before, there's no change management from a user's perspective. What they saw in the attachment list before the migration is the same thing that they're going to see in the attachment list after the migration. And as Jim was talking about earlier, from a document perspective, we can kind of basically get at anything that's stored in SAP. So the documents that are using generic object services, if there's content that's using URL links or it's linked to already a third-party device, we can locate that content using the analysis report. So even if it's stored on like a file system drive, right? We can go find that content, pull it through the SAP archive and pull it through the SAP infrastructure and then put it into the SAP archive. So that way we're consolidating all of the content. We have one place that we're going to go do backup restorations and business continuity. So first step, identify all that stuff. Where is it? What is it? Then using the doc migrate tool, we're going to migrate it and store it in the Mobius cloud. In Mobius. So again, Mobius is SAP Archive or Rocket SAP Archive. And this doesn't matter where you want to store it. So Mobius Cloud, we can do that. And we'll talk about that in a couple minutes, what the options are, or your on-premise environment. So lots of different or a lot of flexibility there in terms of how and where you want to store content and also how you want to manage it. So I thought I'd just show a couple of screen captures just in terms, and again, for the SAP users, this is going to be, you're going to recognize this. This is exactly what happens in the process. You'll click on create attachment, select a document. Now, this is an example of when we're selecting a document manually. This document could have come in through a business process or some sort of RPA, or workflow, etc. But I'm just going to kind of give you a basic example of we're using the SAP menu, creating an attachment, selecting the document, and then we're going to use the attachment list. And then the document is now stored in SAP, and any of the users who have access to that transaction can go and look at that. So that's standard out of the box SAP functionality. The problem with it is what it's doing is it's storing it in SAP cluster tables, highly inefficient. It kind of clobbers, it breaks the document up, it stores the pieces in different chunks. And it takes a lot of space. And as Jim was talking about earlier, over time, this is going to, and not that much time, it happens relatively quickly where you're going to notice a degradation in the performance. And secondarily, once we start talking about migrating over to HANA, we're talking about using the wire, we're talking about the amount of data and the cost associated with HANA. So definitely there are far more efficient ways to store this, and that's part of the different methods that Jim was talking about earlier. So how do we solve the challenge with SAP Doc Migrate? So again, we assume that we've already established an SAP archive environment, the Mobius environment, and then we're going to link the content and migrate the content from SAP over to the SAP archive environment. And as we were talking about earlier, the from a screen perspective, and sorry, I just realized my last bullet here just says SAP GUI. So that's Fiori as well. Wherever, if you're using Fiori tiles, SAP GUI, wherever you had access to the attachment link using archive link, you're still going to have access. So no change in protocol there from a user's perspective. And that's, again, kind of why, this one's a very quick win. Now, we're also happy to do the analysis if we run this report and we perform the ROI analysis with you and realize, okay, we're kind of on the cusp, it's 2 years out. All right, that's fine. We'll now look at the transactional data as well. But the bottom line is you want to get it out, and it's going to be less expensive, right? To get the content out and manage it in a secondary environment. And, just a couple more screens on what this looks like. So the migration report, or sorry, the registration report, this is where we're going to identify. So once we've analyzed and we identified the content, we're going to now start selecting what content we want to register in chunks to actually migrate. So we start with this first screen. We set up our filter or select criteria, essentially. That's going to give us our list. And we're then going to decide at what time, this is again based on a time where the system has the lowest amount of processes that are being performed inside of SAP, migrate the content. And, all of the standard things that you would expect in a migration are there. You can see down here, it might be a little difficult to see, but you can see, green dot means this was a full execution, that document's moved. A red dot means that there was some sort of issue, there was an error with the document. So again, we're, assume that we're going to go through, migrate the content, fix any issues or items of errors. Most of the time, an error item would be a link that's dead. I mean, that's kind of the issue that we would see, and meaning that instead of that document being stored in SAP, it was a link to some other document, and when we tried to interrogate the link to get the content, there was some sort of issue. But those are the types of things that we remediate during the migration process. And then I also just wanted to kind of give a little bit, I know we talked about cost a lot and what that means. So just wanted to give a little bit of information. And this is, this is based on rack rates. So we understand you have specially negotiated rates in your SAP environment. And but this will serve as a little bit of a baseline in terms of, and we've been very conservative here. So we've, assumed that we're only going to be able to get 10% of the content, the document content out. There's no reason why it should be that little. Most instances, we can get 50% or even up to 90%. There's really no reason to leave the document content in there as long as we can still associate it with the transaction and as long as we can still access it. So we just wanted to give you some baseline numbers in terms of how quickly we can achieve an ROI leveraging SAP Archive from Rocket and also performing the migration quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly run through the managed services component. And this is specifically for, once we've assumed that we've established an SAP archive, we've migrated content, and there's, a few different options in terms of how we now manage that technology to allow your business to ensure that you have the most agile practices. And a couple of just data points before we jump into that is, and this is, these are from reports that Accenture has created, but essentially there's a couple of different ways to look at why managed services make sense or hosted environment makes sense. One is the obvious one, which is cost savings. Again, when we have a team that's in place where their sole job is to just focus on this, that's our sole job of focusing on the SAP archive infrastructure, the clouding environment, our ability to monitor that environment, repair that environment, patch that environment, etc. There's an economy of scale there. That means that we have several people who are doing this with, which in most organizations, it might be one or two. And you have all of those issues associated with 24-hour SLAs, the issues of people going on vacation. I think the traditional term was hit by a bus, but we like to say won the lottery. So all of that kind of stuff, right? So nothing new here, but I just thought I'd point it out. But the other thing that, is really interesting and important is the ability to allow your organization to achieve its greatest level of flexibility and agility. So we're not in the normal change management process of an organization where you have resources that are multitasking, possibly performing administrative services and upgrade services and patching services on multiple applications. This becomes, our sole focus for you. And that means you can take that out, right? So we're not talking about, okay, there's a new patch that comes out and it has a specific feature that our business wants to leverage, but we just don't have the time in our project schedule to do it. And we have to kick it out 9 months, 12 months down the road. You can recognize the agility and the capabilities of your applications far more rapidly by leveraging managed services. And I've got some formatting issues here with my little checkboxes. But just a few things, about Zia is we're not a massive, huge company that you come to and say, okay, we've got a very specific program and you've got to fit into one of our boxes for managed services. We're very flexible. So we want to make sure that the service that we're providing you aligns exactly with the way that you want this application to be managed. So, a few of those things are, we become an extension of your ISN support team. We already have our own change management programs, protocols, and SOPs, but we integrate those with yours. So we want to make sure that we're following, the same type of standards that you expect, and also integrating with your existing SOPs and WPDs. And then, there's just a few other things around. Zia isn't going to charge for ingress, egress fees, etc. Whatever the wire cost is, that's fine. We pass it straight through, but there's no uplift. So we're not going to do any uplift on infrastructure fees, etc. If you ask us to manage in Amazon Web Services, that's fine. We'll use our reference architecture. In many instances, we would do it in the same zone that you're already located in, so that we can connect directly to your existing SAP environment. And again, like I said, no infrastructure uplift fees. We're really focused on the core of our business, which is providing the management services of the infrastructure itself and the application to ensure that it's achieving its highest level of capability. And let's see here, flexibility and transparency. This is really important to us. This is part of the monitoring agents, et cetera, that we leverage. These things are not only for us. We're always transparent in terms of what's happening in your environment. We provide reports on what's happening in your environment. And every month and every quarter, we provide you with key performance indicators of the various things that we're monitoring and how we did. So not only from an infrastructure standpoint, but also how did we do from a tier 2, tier 3 support perspective to make sure that we're meeting your objectives. The other thing
is you're appealing to the global supply chain manager in me.
Yes. And then, the last bullet here I think is important as well. From a lot of cloud providers or MSPs, you'll find that they kind of want to stick within their box of their core capabilities. We're happy to look at the full integrated solution, and we think that that's important. Meaning, if you're leveraging the SAP archive from Mobius, and you have 3 or 4 different application APIs to self-service portals, etc., what can happen in a standard MSP is there's an upgrade or patch coming, and they might overlook that. And so what we do is take into account the entire solution and say, okay, we have a patch that's coming out. There's an update to the API. We know that there are 3 integrations written here. We already have the code. And that's part of our standard operating procedure, is to go into the lower environments, review where that code impact is, make sure that we're testing that and that we're following WPD in order to transport that in before making any issue, before possibly creating an issue. So that's another difference. Is happy to include the entire solution. We think that that's important in order to achieve your business objectives of essentially full uptime. I mean, I know everybody wants to talk about all the 9s after the dots, but essentially, we need this thing to be running. So what are the options that we have? So if you just look here at the bottom, we've got a key. The traditional implementation is on-premise. In most instances, customers would likely, in a traditional or legacy environment, using VMs. That's okay. So we can provide application managed services on your on-premise implementation. And it means that we're going to take ownership of the applications, but it's very likely that your organization, your existing IT department, is going to want to manage the infrastructure. So that's okay. We have a model for that. And then, there's some shared responsibilities in terms of database performance tuning, et cetera, that we might help with. But in most instances, our customers would continue to own the database server aspects itself. The other option is the customer has already chosen a cloud, and we are going to go into that cloud. So it's almost exactly like an on-premise implementation. You already have an IS and IT SOP created, or a support team created for infrastructure management, and we are going to come in and provide the overlay of the application, and we would provide the application managed services, and we would be very tightly integrated with your IS and IT support, so that all of the change control, we're part of it, etc. If there's new patches, security network, port changes, all of that, we're part of that process, so that we can ensure that the application is still going to continue to perform for you. The third option is you already have a cloud. So let's say you're already in Amazon Web Services, but we're going to create, or Microsoft Azure, or whatever the case is. But what we would do is create a separate work group within your tenant. And that way we would take on the full application managed services, as well as the underlying infrastructure. And this just means you have a fully streamlined process where essentially you don't need to get involved with any of the application management, any of the testing, any of the review of important security patches, et cetera, that are coming out. Zia is going to take care of all of that for you. And then the fourth option is the Zia Cloud. The Zia Cloud is nothing more than an Azure cloud, or an AWS cloud, or a Google Cloud platform. It just means that we are following our reference architecture 100%. And it means that there's more cost savings to be derived. So as you think through on-premise to customer cloud, et cetera, typically once you get to the Zia Cloud, it means that we have our own scripts, we have our own reference architecture, our own Kubernetes management and monitoring in place. So we're now, it means that you're still private. You still have a private instance. We create a new work group for you, but it means that we're able to leverage all of the capabilities that we've already developed. That way, as you can imagine, it keeps the cost at minimum. So doesn't, we don't have a preference here. Whatever makes the most sense for your organizations. There's just different KPIs associated with the different environments, and different cost savings associated with the different environments as well. So just, looking back at this, and I'm not going to go through this next slide. I know it's way too detailed, but looking back at this is what I meant by and this list isn't comprehensive, but you can see that if you're in the Zia Cloud, there's more capability, more control that we have access, more capability to provide you. And so, excuse me, it means that less problems for you, right? Less going to different people, less going to the database people, et cetera. It's Zia takes 100% responsibility for your application. We can also do that in the customer cloud. So this list is totally negotiable. It just kind of depends on where you are, if you want to create a separate subgroup, work group, et cetera. So summary of key benefits. And this is just associated with the cloud. There's a lot of flexibility here. Really what it comes down to is the flexibility, also the threat management, the ability to update and keep the environment patched and upgraded, because we're using a Docker containerized environment. And typically, we would be deploying in Kubernetes. It gives us a lot more agility and speed to value. So, we see new things, a new patch, a new update, a new version come from Rocket. We can quickly assess what those new capabilities are, work with you to determine if we want to leverage those capabilities, and typically deploy that much faster, 2 to 3 times faster than if you're in a traditionally managed on-premise environment, or an environment where you're using shared resources. So I know we're I think here at 11:45. So I'm gonna kind of stop there, and I know that we've been asking for you to put questions. So hopefully I'm going to turn it back over to Shelly here in just a second, but just wanted to let you know to keep your eyes open for a couple more webinars that Jim and I and Rocket and Zia are planning. But this is around the data validation and reconciliation for SAP, and also workload automation and output management for SAP. So those are going to be coming in the next, in the next few months. But also, reach out to us. I think I had our emails on the first slide there. So we're happy. We enjoy one-on-one sessions. I know this is just kind of like a little bit of a scratch the surface. So, happy to chat more and talk to you about your specific environment, your specific requirements, and so on. So Shelley, I think with that, it's probably time to open it up for questions and answers. Well, hopefully we have some.
Yes, we do have a few questions that have come through. So
right.
Please continue to put your questions in the Q&A section if things are coming up for you. The first one I have here is Jim mentioned that there's a potential 97% reduction in storage costs. Does this apply to data only, or does it also apply to other content types?
Okay, well, it's primarily for the data. Because the nature of the data is it's data and indices. When you archive it, basically the indices get blown away. And so there's a significant savings. And that's why I mentioned earlier for sales and distribution, because there are many indices, you get a lot of benefit from archiving those. But you can't archive those until you archive the others. When it comes to things like images, PDF, they tend to not compress as well as things like data or text. And so they will take up more space, usually in the archive. We do compress them some, but you're not going to see the same level of compression that you would see with data or text. And Jeremy was primarily talking about documents. So yes, for me, that's the low-hanging fruit. That's the easiest to get out, the easiest for you to take advantage of right out of the gate. The data archiving is the one it's a little more involved, but if you get it right, it's going to serve you very well for a long time. And there is significant storage savings by archiving that data.
Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Our next question here is, what is the Zia cloud and what is the benefit to using it?
Sure. So the Zia cloud is basically a reference architecture that we have pre-created for Microsoft Azure, for Amazon Web Services, or for Google Cloud Platform. So what that means is that we've already gone through all of the labor of defining all of the resources that one would need in a Kubernetes environment. And we've essentially kind of got it packaged up so that we can deploy it very quickly. So what that means is if you have a new customer, an SAP customer, a customer that wants to leverage the SAP archive, we can define, and this again is in a private tenant for you. So it's not mixed, it's not a shared cloud. It means that we are going to take at the header level and drop down the package that is already defined for you. So it's still specifically configured, customized for you, but all of the backend work and also all of the associated toolware that we need to monitor and manage that application moving forward, we've already got it built. And so that there's savings associated with how we manage it. But one of the other most important things associated with that approach is the time. So we can deploy these types of environments very, very rapidly and save you time and get to the business of what you want to do, which is get the data out and start archiving very quickly. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Jeremy. We have a follow-up question on that, which is this only beneficial for S/4HANA?
No, so we have a lot of cloud capabilities. So there's Zia manages and has the capability to manage a variety of different platforms from Rocket. So we have, the capabilities to manage some of the RPA capabilities, the standard Mobius capabilities, and a variety of other different technologies that we can not only cloud, but also provide the management services for you. So today, yeah, we're just covering this kind of discrete element, but certainly I would, recommend taking a look at the Zia Consulting website and seeing what the other products and capabilities are that we support.
Great, thank you. Another question coming in is Jeremy mentioned a program to help us analyze document content. Can you
Yes.
explain what is involved?
Yep. So what's involved is very simple. Give us a call, shoot us an email, and we will have a quick conversation with you to determine what your, a little bit of a discovery, what your archive needs are, how long you've been using SAP. We'll probably talk to you a little bit about some of the data, the data counts and so on. And then what it involves is we will then send you the transport file. So the transport file is something that goes straight into a SAP. And all that is a report. And we would work with you to schedule it. But literally, when I say it's a less than a 1 hour involvement from us, which typically most of our customers just run it, can transport the file themselves. But usually we'll schedule a WebEx and make sure that, it installs correctly or transports in correctly. And then we'll work with you to understand when you would schedule it, typically in a low utilization time frame. And what it's going to do is quantify all of that document content that is spread around the entire SAP database and give us a report. In a smaller environment, that could run in a couple hours. In a very large multi-terabyte environment, it could take 6 to 8 hours. So, but the main point here is in less than a week from the time we start talking until we can produce an ROI report for you. So it's something that, it gives us a jump start to say, hey, this looks like even just focusing on this content, we can produce an ROI and get to and start having the conversation of how do we move forward.
Great. Another question that came in is, what is the license model for Rocket SAP Archive?
Jim, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Well, primarily Mobius is sold on a per server basis with discounts for non-productive instances. One of the big differences between us and our competitors is that the Mobius viewing client, Mobius View, is licensed on a concurrent basis, where many of our competitors price based on named users. So in general, the total cost of ownership for Mobius for SAP is significantly less than our competition.
Great. That's all the questions I have for now. As you can see, we have a couple emails up here that you can ask additional questions or start a conversation about what you learned from the webinar today. Both of them, sales@Zia Consulting and sales@Rocket Software. Did the two of you want to leave our audience with anything today?
Just one quick question for me. I can't remember our process, Shelley, of how, if somebody wants to reaccess, or where does this appear?
Yeah, great. I'm happy to share that. So you'll be receiving a follow-up email from us with a live link for you to view this whenever you want to. So definitely you're going to receive the recording in the next couple of days.
Okay,
Excellent.
perfect. Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah,
Yep.
Thank you so much. I guess we're done for today. Thanks, Jeremy and Jim, for sharing your expertise and insights. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelley.
Pleasure.
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.